Hi, it's Anne-Marie from Charmed Life Therapy again. Please do tap that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you're enjoying my content at all. It's just time for another update on the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, Ryan Reynolds, everybody else concerned, because the thing is just growing and growing and growing at this point. Time for another little update basically. So as before, there's so many other people doing a brilliant job of all the details. I just want to kind of pick out a few bits here and there because a lot's happened since I last spoke. We've had all kind of manner of counter disputes saying, you know, people wanting to drop out. Ryan Reynolds doesn't want to be involved. Blake doesn't want to be involved. They're all sites filing these dismissals basically, and all of that is to be decided, and Justin himself has decided now to sue Stephanie Jones at this point. Stephanie Jones, kind of, who was at one time Wayfarer's point person for PR basically, until there was a falling out and she was taking actions that were beyond her purview that she'd been given basically. And it is actually looking at this point that this Stephanie Jones and this, it's all, we've always kind of mooted that it's more about a PR thing, this whole thing, than anything, which is kind of what's interesting, because kind of it boils down to the fact that Blake Lively basically got called out for her actions, and what she kind of doesn't like is that she was called out, you know, on her own words, the way she shows up in the world. It was her own interviews that were her downfall. It was her own way that she chose to market this movie. It ends with us, and when that didn't go well, she really did look for a fall guy. Somebody else had to be to blame for all of this, and that's, you know, there'd already been plenty going on to do with Justin and the control of that movie. But it really did boil down to the fact that she got offended at what people thought about her. You know, we've said it before, she's kind of grown up in this environment where she's right about everything, and her point of view is right, and what she has to say is right, and she should get her own way. And that really is the crux of it, really. And it's kind of that with Stephanie Jones too, another person who thinks she gets her own way at the expense of others. So things weren't going very well with her relationship with Wayfarer rather, and this Jennifer Abel, who was either a partner or under her firm, had kind of put in her notice, or whatever you want to call it, and was intending to leave Stephanie Jones. And Stephanie Jones has had a freak out and a wobble and just thought all of her clients were going to walk out the door, and she wouldn't like that. She wouldn't like that loss of control, that loss of income. So kind of then she initiated a firing, I guess, of Jennifer Abel, and kind of coerced her into leaving her phone behind as well. And this phone contained messages between her and Wayfair parties, and then somehow that phone has made its way from Stephanie Jones, either the phone or the text messages have made their way from Stephanie Jones to the other side of things, to Blake Lively's PR, Leslie Sloan, and then they've cherry-picked the messages and concocted this legal argument, this California rights dispute that's triggered it all off this filing. And even at that point, we're pretty much kind of, the thinking is now that Blake actually didn't intend for it to go any further than that. You know, Justin had allowed a lot at this point of himself to be walked all over basically, and I think there's a big aspect of that. Blake really did think she could file that initial dispute where she called him all of these things and said it was all retaliation for her sexual harassment allegation. She thought she could simply make that complaint, and that Justin, with what she'd come to learn about him, that he just allowed himself to be mowed down really, in a way. You know, she really did think he wasn't going to retaliate at that point. But when somebody accuses you of sexual harassment, you really are left with no choice really, if you want to have some kind of career, if you want your livelihood, if you want your children to be able to grow up without that stigma of the father being accused of this thing. So she, again, through her own actions, her own decisions, her own choices, she's causing her own downfall. So anyway, that's kind of a brief recap, and it's kind of like the key points in a way. Everything else is arguments, and kind of what I do like about it all, if you have to say like, is I can't help but be impressed by the way Justin Baldoni is handling it all, because basically he's gone off to Hawaii, he's taken his kids, his wife, and he's just keeping a low profile while all of this is handled by his lawyers. He's not commenting, he's not having, he's obviously telling his friends or his family not to comment on things. It's just, let's just let this play out. I'm not going to feed this fire, I'm not going to feed this argument. And meanwhile, everything is kind of kicking off, and it's getting to the point now where pretty soon we'll be talking about depositions, which is the reason Blake and Ryan are filing to get themselves dismissed out of this suit. So we had Ryan file one day and Blake file the next. And again, it's that use of the language. I don't think any of us would feel as badly about them as we kind of are if it wasn't for the fact of all this language that they're using. It's like even when they're presenting, like the judge or the court, if you like, with these letters of dismissal or actions, however you call them, it's littered with stuff that is just a direct attack on Justin Baldoni's character. It's not just as simple as here's my legal argument. Both of those dismissals or applications are littered with things that are just a direct attack on Justin Baldoni in terms of his personal life and his professional life and what he stands up for. Everything that he's ever said, his books, his podcasts, his TED Talk, whatever it is all used against him, all manufactured into a way to call him a predator. Even, it's even trying to say he identifies as a predator in Ryan's dismissal. He's basically trying to say, well, why shouldn't I call him a predator? I think he's a predator. He's, the things he said in his thing tells me he's a predator. He admits it himself, and there's no such thing. It's just all concocted. But that is the thing, that and Ryan, the language of this thing saying, he's almost saying, Justin, I'm the man that Justin would love to be, that I'm really the man. I'm the man that stands up for my wife, that's going to fight this thing, that's not going to have some guy sexually harass her, or I'm going to call him a predator if I want to call him a predator. But that's not the way. If you know what I mean, we've said all along, you find out your wife's being sexually harassed, you don't think, oh, well, I know what the best way to handle this is. I'm going to make him a character in my Deadpool and Wolverine movie, and I'm going to mock him that way, and I'm going to sort it out that way, which is literally what he did. And the thing is, in this dismissal, his application, he's basically saying, He's kind of admitting, really without admitting, that Nicepool is Justin Baldoni now. He's dropping that facade of it's nothing to do with it, because he's basically saying, well, he's suing me for hurt feelings, really. That's all it is. He didn't like that I put him in my movie and I mocked him. That's literally what he's saying. But, I remember watching Deadpool and Wolverine, and I'm a big Hugh Jackman fan, or I was. I'm starting to question this now, because I think if Hugh's party to all of this, it's really, really questionable. So yeah, I'm a big Wolverine fan. So I kind of wanted to watch Deadpool and Wolverine for Wolverine. I'm not really interested in Deadpool. It's not my form of humour. It's a lot of bodily references and all of this. And actually, what I find interesting now is this, what is the why of why Ryan Reynolds always brings it back to bodily functions and sexual functions and, pretty gross stuff. And really, he brings it back to us just being bodies, because he can't handle emotions. He can't handle what's real. He can't have real conversations, real dialogues. So he always reverts it to all we are as human beings is bodies. That's why there's so many jokes about being gay and perineums and body parts and all of the rest of it. That's why. It's literally why. It's because he can't handle emotions and he can't handle real things. So I remember watching that Deadpool and Wolverine movie and thinking, I really don't know what most of these jokes are about. Am I supposed to find it funny? I don't really like a lot of the, breaking the fourth wall thing and talking to camera. I only really think the people that did that successfully was Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd in Moonlighting. But it's just too much in this movie. And I remember watching the movie, and the opening sequence is just Deadpool, killing, dismembering a whole bunch of people, who've come from this multiverse, other dimension or something or other. And the thing is, when you've done a lot of healing in your life, and you've looked into a lot of things, as I have, and many people have, you can't just watch something like that in isolation anymore, because you see like literally people being mown down, and really in the context of the film, they're only being mown down because they've shown up to do the job. I know this is, for some people, this is going to sound really stupid and woke and oversensitive, but the thing is, there's an aspect to my mind that goes, all of those people is like just casually mowing down in all these horrific ways. If you're thinking of it in terms of them being real people, they would all have families and grandchildren and daughters and sons and husbands, wives, partners. You know what I mean? And it's just the way like death is treated. So they're not really dying for any reason. And it's, the jokes interspersed with it all, and the pointlessness of it all. And that kind of set up the movie for me, because I'm not so far gone that I don't see the point of not showing death and things in movies or anything like that. But to me, it's got to be driving the narrative really in some way, or there's got to be a bit more to it for it to be just cavalier. And just, I don't know, there's something, I'm not very good at dealing with that anymore, I don't think. That's what I found hard. And then just the constant sex jokes and gay jokes and all of the rest of it. Because if you took out Wolverine and you took out Nicepool, which is basically Justin Baldoni, then there's no story. There literally is no story with that. If Hugh Jackman hadn't said, fine, I'm going to punish my body one more time, I'm going to do Wolverine again, and Ryan hadn't had this conflict with Justin Baldoni, there would have been no story to go ahead with, So maybe that was Ryan's thinking, God, this movie's looking a bit weak, I need to have something else involved. And Justin, being the person he is, being this nice guy, being this person who allows people to kind of get their own way over him, when the women anyway, because he's trying to serve women's purpose, if you like, this idea, Justin being this idea of a male feminist, if you like, and empowering women. Ryan's gone, oh, that's a really good idea to stick that on a character and do all kinds of terrible things to him, basically, because I just don't understand what this niceness is about. There's got to be something wrong behind that. It's not normal for people to be nice and open-minded and kind and the rest of it and talk about the feelings, because that Ryan Reynolds can't do that. He has to bring it back to a body part. Every conversation has to come back to a body part or something that's a bit gross or that makes you feel a bit, ugh, what's that? It has to come back to something like that. And that's kind of what happened. So he's admitted that Justin Baldoni is in effect Nicepool in this movie. And now you've got, in the last few days, all of a sudden we're all looking at that Deadpool and Wolverine movie a little bit differently. And this, there's this scene towards the end where Ryan Reynolds' 7 or 8-year-old daughter, Inez, is playing one of these variants of Deadpool. And he has her say, basically, he, as the person that's got all of the control over the movie, even though he's not the director, is whatever he is, he's probably the writer, co-writer, whatever he is. He's had his 7 or 8-year-old daughter film this scene where she basically has to say, if I want your opinion, I'll take Wolverine's dick out of your mouth. And of course, I kind of remember seeing that at the time, but by then I was kind of immune, and maybe that was the idea. By the time you've got to that point in the movie, you've heard gay jokes and body part jokes and just things that are a bit like ugh for so long. You're probably a bit immune to actually realizing that's a 7 or 8 year old kid saying that, talking about that. And now we've kind of had this director's commentary. Somebody's pointed out in the director's commentary that runs over the top of the filming. You've got the director, Sean Levy, and Ryan Reynolds talking about how she didn't want to say that line. And she only came back and said she would say that line after Ryan Reynolds has made it clear, well, we'll find somebody else to play the part if you don't want to say that line. Now that is very disturbing to most people, because that is clearly manipulation. You know that most kids, if they don't want to do something, if mum or dad says, fine, I'll do it, or get somebody else to do it, or your sister will do it and they'll get the reward, or what, you know what I mean? A kid will soon conform. So that kind of is really disturbing. And it's kind of really disturbing that we all didn't say sooner, that's not appropriate. It's not appropriate to have a 7 or 8 year old child having to say something like that as part of a movie role. And then what they're saying, which makes it even worse, is they had the kid try it at least 70 different ways. Now they're probably overestimating, because they said between 70 and 100, but it makes you kind of think that she did it at least 70 times. Which once is enough, really, most people are saying. You know, and the thing is, when you do things like that to kids, manipulate them in that way, that doesn't just get brushed off. That stays in them as, it's my job to be manipulated. It's my job to conform. I need to do what I'm told, even when I'm not comfortable with it. I can't have boundaries. You know, so what he's done there is really a big deal. It's really a big deal. And this is what's coming out more and more is, and it's why I keep trying to, because I don't want to get into hate and who's right and who's wrong in a way. That's why I keep trying to bring it back into this idea of, we are more than human beings on this planet. We're like spiritual beings having a human experience. So to make it make sense to me, I have to think that Blake and Ryan's spirits, if you like, were up there saying, we volunteer to come down on this planet at this time and be complete assholes in order to show human beings where they're going wrong. And God says, right, we'll get you a David for your Goliath, and there's Justin Baldoni, you know that. And I do feel like this whole thing is for us to shine a light on ourselves and to look at our own actions and look at how we treat other people. It really is for us to just look at it all and question these people that we elevate, and how we believe whatever we're told, and we believe that because people look a certain way and seem to live an aspirational life, that somehow makes them better than us, or what they have to say more true than us, or whatever it is. You know, Blake and Ryan, they truly do believe that it's their way or it's the highway. You're either with them or you're wrong, and that is what is stamped all over this thing. You know, anybody kind of with an ounce of sense that are in their position should be really thinking about settling, because it's like, I think that's the thing, is you're seeing they're completely unaware of any responsibility for what the public is perceiving. You know, you're having people, you know, the people that are like on YouTube and that now at this point, they're being told the right wing or the Trumpers or the women haters, simply because they're investigating what's going on this case, and they're not willing to just settle for the party line. They're finding out the real facts, the real truth. They're going deeper. But because they don't like that, because Blake and Ryan and these people working for them don't like that, then there has to be something wrong with them. You know, Blake and Ryan are never going to examine their own actions through this thing. They never are. But there will never be that satisfaction. And maybe that's why they have to proceed, because in a way neither of those people are ever going to be able to come up with an apology that will be genuine. There will never be an apology that's not without some kind of subtext that will again be a dig at Justin Baldoni, because it's clear from these legal writings that it's very much Ryan that's written them, and then they've just been handed to the lawyer to bring in the legal argument, because they're so personally an attack on Justin. It's almost untrue. I kind of find it hard to listen to them because they're so nasty. And that's why kind of you just got to admire Justin Baldoni, because he's just not taking part in it. He's just isolated himself and he's allowing the professionals to deal with it. And, you know, he's doing the things that he has to do in order to kind of protect his reputation and gain back some ground. But other than that, he is not maliciously attacking anybody. He's just doing literally what needs to be done. And Blake and Lively, I keep calling him Lively. Blake and Ryan are just doing the literal opposite of that. They're just keeping it so nasty. And at this point in time, it's a real shame, because, you know, you've got to question everybody around them. And that's why it'll be interesting when it comes to the idea of depositions and things, and we start finding out, well, who knew what did Taylor Swift know, what did Hugh Jackman know. I mean, Hugh Jackman must know loads, and that's kind of a bit disturbing, really, because we've always thought of Hugh as the nice guy, haven't we, and thought he would have been the kind of person to rise above and not be cruel and not be hurtful and not take part in hurtful things. But when you watch Deadpool and Wolverine back now, you think, well, he must have known something, because otherwise you'd have been saying, what's that weird line about? I don't understand. What's the joke here? You know, he's big friends with Ryan. Surely he'd be saying, I don't really get the joke here, mate. Can you just explain it? So at this point, we kind of have to think that you is either party to the story or has just been hoodwinked by the story. But then you think, well, Hugh Jackman, surely you're intelligent enough to say, well, if Blake's been sexually harassed, why haven't you reported it to SAG? Why haven't you gone back to, you know, where's the chain of doing the right thing? You know, the union, the police, the movie studio, you know, where's the HR complaints? You know, where's, you know, but instead it's like, no, he's jumped on board with this idea of just humiliating the guy in a movie. And you think that's the way to go to. So it will be really interesting to find out the where's and where's and why fors or whatever. But I really do just keep wanting to bring it back to not being the blame game, but just looking at what us as human beings do to each other and to ourselves, and the things we overlook and the things that disturb us and we laugh off and we validate by not challenging them as well. Me personally, I don't think Taylor's as involved as people think she is. I think she's been interested and I think she's been supported, but I don't think she's known the majority of what was happening, and I certainly don't think she knew about her own power was being used behind her back, as all this business of Blake and her dragons and all of that. And I don't think Taylor has been like, you must use this actress for young Lily and I must have this song and you must fire that composer. I think all of that is my feeling at this moment in time, is that all of that is a concoction in Blake Lively's mind, and she just likes to bandy names around these people of power that she has in her orbit. I think she uses their power for her own persuasion, if you like. That's my feeling. So that's kind of my little roundup of my thoughts on it at the moment, really. And you can see how Blake and Ryan's lives and careers are unraveling, because they won't just hold up their hands and say, we got it wrong, we took one or two missteps, we're sorry, we're going to put it right. They're just not doing that. So they are on this path to self-destruction, because neither of them are willing to back down or say they were wrong, or say even that any steps that they took along the way were wrong. You know, they're not even saying, well, I still feel like I was sexually harassed, but maybe I shouldn't have done this and I shouldn't have done that and I shouldn't have got his name removed from the movie. They're not saying anything like that. They're not even admitting any tiny bits of culpability so that we could kind of bond with them or forgive them in any kind of way. They're just doubling down, tripling down. So it's a really interesting thing to watch, and that's why it touches on all kinds of things. It's, you know, people are trying to bring politics in this to say that people who are pro-Justin, well, it's because they have certain political beliefs and stuff like that. No, it's just we're concerned about what's happened to this guy, and we kind of have to stand up and say it's not okay to treat somebody like this. We're all supposed to be in this life together. We're not supposed to be doing this to each other, and we need to point this out. And actually, it's like I say, in a lot of cases, there's a lot of people out there that literally just want Blake and Ryan to say they were wrong, to acknowledge that they've misstepped. But that's the problem when you're dealing with narcissists. Narcissists are kind of here in life to throw up a mirror and show you where we're all going wrong, because narcissists will show you everything about yourself that you need to work on in a way. So, you know, if you feel less than, if you feel unworthy, if you feel like you've got low self-esteem, a narcissist will show you exactly the things that you yourself think are wrong with you, and it's up to you, you know, if you're going to work on getting more self-esteem and more self-worth, because we are all equals and we all get to feel as good as each other, but we don't tend to walk around doing that. And that's kind of why, to me, this case is really, really important. And it's important that, you know, something does balance out along the way, whatever that is. And if Blake and Ryan don't want to apologise and they don't want to make good, then balance has to come some other way, and that might be in the form of money and a big payout, but it's not down to me. But there we go. So please do like and subscribe if this has been of any interest to you. I'm grateful for any help and support. I'm a single businesswoman, so it all helps me grow and gain some reach, and I'm really appreciative of all of you. Thanks for watching if you stayed to the end, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.